Welcome back. Welcome in. It's Country Roads Confidential. It's earsports.com. I'm Mike Casazza, joined by Chris Anderson. Chris, on Monday, we met and talked about all of the work the assistant coaches and the staff in general is doing, adding players to the roster. Um, we at least know who the assistant coaches are, I think. Right? Like a reservation we had in discussing anything about the roster was how crazy the amount and the frequency of additions are. It was like that for the coaches for a couple of days too now. I'm pretty sure. Nope, I'm not. I'm relatively sure we know enough to talk confidently about the coaching staff right now. We have all the core pieces and the keystones in place. We've got the middle pieces, the corner pieces. Everybody knows what this is going to look like at the end right now. You might see one or two names or positions filled before too long. I do think we pretty much have a coaching staff for 2025. Congratulations, Chris. We made it
Well,
from coaching
you said
change initiated.
2025. Was that the year or the number of coaches that are on-field coaches this year?
Yeah, just think about like where we started with 52 to 15, which again is not the number of assistant coach possibilities, right? But that was the final score in Lubbock, Texas, to where we are right now, which is, from I think December 1st they make the change. Here we are, middle part of January. A ton of turnover, a ton of dollar signs involved. Um, but golly, Chris, we have 19 coaches. I'm pretty sure that we can count as an assistant coaching staff, which leads to this. I cannot advise you on who or what is an assistant coach anymore in the sense of what it used to be before and what it is now. Before you had 10 assistant position coaches and a head coach. You had analysts and graduate assistants on the side. Now you have unlimited coaching staff, which means your analysts are assistant position coaches, your GAs are assistant position coaches, your quality control coaches. This stuff is all just assistant position coach now. And get used to it too. Like we talked about how crazy the reimagined rosters were, the new rules, and how the new normal will be flipping over 40 people, 50 people, 60 people. You're not going to have a new coaching staff every year, but you have to think of it differently than you did a couple of years ago, especially now when you're building a coaching staff and you're putting together a hot board and you're trying to figure out who's going to coach what. You're not limited to 10 spots anymore, which has made this confusing, but also kind of informative and entertaining as well.
Yeah, I mean, go back to our podcast from a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where we said, "Hey, this is going to be like an NFL coaching staff. There's going to be guys." I think the example we gave, I think I pulled up the Buffalo Bills coaching staff and was like, "Look, they have a guy that only coaches nickelbacks. Like there could be a nickelback coach at West Virginia." And I think like 4 days later, they announced Henry Weinreich as the nickel slash Sam coach. So that's how it's going to work. And some of it's a little extra like that. Like that's a position coach for literally one position on the field. Some of it is just kind of, as you noted, kind of reimagining, reshaping, rewording, however you want to do the assistant coaches. Because there have been, for years, there has been the guy that helped out, multiple GAs that helped out on the offensive line. In more
Yeah.
recent years, there's been the assistant offensive line coach. They just weren't, I don't know, we didn't get their contracts. They didn't get press releases. They didn't get all this other stuff. Now they do, or they do with Rich Rodriguez, or at least the first time around, because those guys are being announced, those guys are being recognized, their contracts are made available. Uh, Mike has FOIA'd the FOIA office to death of every staffer at West Virginia. Sorry, I know it's still a sore subject about some other FOIA that's still, what are we on, 6 weeks now? That's another story.
Six
Um,
years. That's another story too.
But so I think it's more of a reimagining of what, not what it's always been, but there's always been a main coach for a position with multiple guys that helped him out. And now instead of it being unpaid students and GAs, it's going to be salaried assistant to the assistant coaches.
Way it should be. It's the way it's always been. They just found ways to fudge it. I shouldn't say always, but for many years it's been that way. They just found ways to fudge it. Um,
Well, they would always let the the student assistants and the GAs, they would always run the camps and they would be paid for running the camps. They would be paid for refereeing 7-on-7. I mean, found it annoying sometimes when there weren't real refs that ran the 7-on-7 camps. But then somebody was like, "Yeah, well, we changed it from actual refs because they used to have refs that were like in training, and then they changed it to the GAs and everything because they were like, this is how we get these guys paid. This is how we get them the money that they deserve by letting them by making them work more and then paying them for it.
Um, one more just note about this that this one I can't stress enough. Many people are pinning the 5 million for coaching staff and 2.5 million for support staff to the wall as something to look at when you're discussing who they've hired and how many spots they have. Um, I'm one of those people just because it's there. I was like, oh, here we go. That's your beacon. You look at that number when they're hiring coaches. It's rubbish, Chris. The best thing I can tell you is that it's nonsense. I've asked about this a bunch, and what I've gotten from people is that this just never came up in the contract stuff. Like this was not a make or break thing. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't an acquiesce or anything like that. I don't know that Rodriguez asked for it or didn't care. I don't know if West Virginia pushed a number across the table on a piece of paper and Rodriguez picked it up and folded it and put it in his pocket. No idea. I don't think it was a big deal in their discussions. I think they put the number on paper because man, it looks cool. And when you got someone like me, for the 100th time, I will take the bait. I promise you, right? But when I'm adding up all the numbers and you say, wait a minute, they're promised 5 million. Now they're at 5.5 million. Man, that looks great. Wow, they were right. All the money is available for the coaching staff. That's either evil genius or a happy accident by West Virginia's athletic department, and good for them. Like that's if that's what happens because you put a number on the paper just to put it on there and show a commitment, and you clear that bar. Thumbs up, man. You did your job. You got me and you got everybody along the way. But you also have committed over $5.5 million to the coaching staff, which, if we're honest, Chris, probably close to what they did last year when you think about the same number of heads that you're counting. Probably more right now, but I don't think it's a different sport, never mind in a different ballpark. So that's here's my point. I don't know who would count toward 5 million and who would count toward 2.5 million. Yeah, your main position coaches, that's your coaching staff. I would think an assistant position coach supports the assistant coach and therefore is support staff. But maybe support staff is just your strength and conditioning, your social media, your recruiting office, and maybe your coaches, whether they're assistant coaches or assistant position coaches, analysts, whatever, maybe that's all coaching staff. And maybe it doesn't matter, Chris, because they are going to get as many people on the staff as they think they need. It's going to cost what it costs. And this is a classic shoot now and ask questions later. Make this work and then review it when you're done, which that can lead to another dynamic we can talk about in a minute. But have I properly scrambled the eggs here by just saying what started looking like this looks like something completely different now and pay no attention to it?
Yeah, I mean the numbers. I'm with you. I don't whatever the numbers are. Who really cares? Like, is it going to get to five, 2.5? I know, like, it is a good talking point. It is, and maybe they played you like a fiddle to get that number out there and get it going. But these athletic departments, and even just not even the athletic department, just focusing on the football program, they're massive. There are a massive number of people that are involved in every aspect of this program. There are the academic advisors and the people who counsel the players that help them with their schoolwork, do all that stuff. There are the trainers. There's the strength and conditioning staff, like you noted. There are people who work in the administrative part of this stuff in the building. Who counts towards what? Like you said, does that count towards the 2.5? All those people are, quote, supporting staff that's supporting the football program. Who knows? Honestly, as long as they're spending the money, I don't think, there needs to be a full accounting of it. Although, as my cheat sheet over here, I'm just staring at your list of coaches with all their salaries perfectly added up so that we can give an accounting, an audit of what's being spent and
Yeah.
used and where. But, um, again, I think the point is there is a nice mix of maybe some more frugal spending on some younger guys that they didn't have to spend as much on. And then some real, we'll call it the Zach Alley clause of, hey, there you go. Here's a big Brinks chuck. We need
Mm.
you. And they did it. So
Allie is a 3-year contract, $1.5 million a year. Chris, everybody else is a 1-year contract. I have a theory. What is
interesting.
yours?
I Everyone's expendable. Uh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I don't know Henry Weinreich. I don't. Never met
Yeah.
him. Honestly, when his name came across my computer screen, I had never heard of the guy before. I've since learned quite a bit about him. Very interesting guy. Has a degree in chemistry from a very good school in Tennessee. Kind of self-made coach. Was a player and then kind of got into volunteering and GA and all that stuff. Cool story. If in a year, like we don't need to spend this money on a Nichols coach, he's gone. Or he's absorbed into some other role. So this is so new and different, Chris, and you're committing so much money to it that I think you give everybody a 1 year contract, a 1 year lease, and if you come back to the dealership in 12 months and you like the way it rode, buy the thing. And if you don't, swap it out for something different. So Allie, you're going to have to spend huge on to get, and you probably need to know you got the right guy there. They probably think they have the right guy in the other spots. I just think that everything else is just so new and different. And who knows how much is going to change in a year, Chris? Who knows what the legislation will be in a year? I don't. Maybe there's more clear definition than what you and I are trying to muddle through right now. And maybe teams just have a better idea. Maybe Rodriguez as the CEO or his chief of staff or whomever says, don't need this, or hey, you know what? We like this guy, but we'd be better off with this over here. Like this is trial and it's trial and trial. Maybe there's error, maybe there's triumph. I don't know. But this is a lot of trying to figure out what's going to look right in the future. So you commit to things in the present and you commit to adjusting and adapting as this goes along. That's why I think you have so many 1 year contracts.
I like it. More work for the accounting department and for Ren Baker next year, but I think it's smart. You don't want to. There's no need to tie up a bunch of money in contracts and positions for multiple years if you don't know what it's going to be after one. So I like your theory. Maybe that's what it is. Baby W's like, yeah. That is what it is. That's exactly why we did that. No other reason. That's
Possible.
how I did that. Can I before we go to, I kind of wanted us to go through like position by position, but can I go off field first with something that I don't know if we have a salary for? Maybe you did and I missed it, but it was press released finally over the weekend. I think we've kind of known it for a while, but Chuck Lilly as general manager of the program going to
Pending,
be
Chris.
pending. Yeah. Well, oh, your FOIA is pending. I was like, okay.
Hmm.
I was like, wait, no, it's not pending. It got released. That's what I'm
Yeah.
reading here. Um, I just want to read this part. This is for my recruit nicks out there. This is directly from the press release. At WVU, Lilly will work as the lead negotiator on all player acquisition deals.
Negotiator, Chris. That
Yes,
means that means that he is meeting with other parties on the regular on this stuff too.
yes,
And not only that, but like lead negotiator. So a position coach or a coordinator, the head coach is going to be like, I think he's worth this much. And the GM's gonna be like, well, actually, you know what? We can get him for this much less, or we're going to have to spend this much more. What a business. And
yeah.
and
I
like
just
that's a
if anybody's
huge.
listening, wondering what it's like, here you go. That one sentence. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's true. Which also makes me wonder, because on Monday we talked about the rapid rate they're adding players, and he's been here for a little bit, but I wonder if they got something in place already where you check these boxes, therefore you get this much to sign here, or this little to sign here, or like is there just a standard formula, a standard offer sheet they give to people? Because if you look at the assistant coaches, Chris, they're all pretty much that similar salary range, unless you're a coordinator or an aggregator coordinator. Um, is it that easy? Just like, hey, this is what we do. It's West Virginia. It's Rodriguez's program. It's Zach Alley's defense. It's whatever. This is what you get paid to transfer here based on your resume, based on how much time you have left on campus. I wonder if they've simplified it that much. One way to find out, and unfortunately, we are not yet at that point, but um,
You
that's
gonna
enlightening
try to
because, like,
FOIA player contracts now?
well, you'll never get the NIL, but if they're getting revenue sharing, Chris, at a
Yeah.
publicly funded university, I don't know how that's not a public record.
Oh, WVU will find a way.
Believe me, they will try. Yeah, sure. But like the other thing is, I don't understand why this stuff is so secret. Like I'm doing a lot of I'm making the legal office do a lot of work for contracts. They used to release that stuff with hires,
Yeah.
Chris. I don't know why, but we'll see. Let's get into just some staff stuff here. Do you want to run through, like you said, what the positions are and how they're breaking down and because it does take some detailing here because there's titles I've never seen before. Never mind assistant position coaches, but like just general defensive assistant, general offensive assistant.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different, and maybe we should take small bites out of this.
I was gonna say maybe yeah, we'll go position by position and talk about who might be working with said players. Like for
Okay.
instance, let's start at quarterback. Um, Rhett Rodriguez, quarterbacks coach. That seems pretty straightforward.
Finally.
Travis Trickett, the senior offensive assistant. I can tell you whatever that means, but he's going to be working with quarterbacks as well, like very clearly. And that's it for right now, right? Like, I mean, is there a GA like Isaiah Macklin? You know, I know he was with the GA or was an assistant quarterbacks coach last year, but I don't know if he's officially been retained or not at this
I
point.
hope he is. He was a menace at practice. He would chase everybody around with like one of those pads and try to both poke the ball free and like in ball security drills. Like you never saw him coming. He probably would have been a great rush in college, or at least like a nickel back that would come around the corner. He was just causing havoc in those drills. So I hope he makes it back. I don't know what comes of those graduate assistants last year who were assistant position coaches. I did not put their salaries in because they're really low and they're graduate assistants. It does not look right. You're like, wait a minute, that guy's making thousands of dollars to coach a position. He's a GA, so it doesn't make any sense. So
And he's getting his school paid for,
yeah,
and in addition to that as well.
yeah. So like that doesn't make sense, and like because people would conflate that with saying, wow, they didn't spend for Neil Brown's staff. Well, it was different. Again, that rule for unlimited staffs went into place in June last year. There was no runway to do what they're doing right now. And now you see like assistant position coaches coming in making 75 grand, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they really have committed to to Rodriguez's program, unlike Brown's. That's apples and oranges. It's apples and pianos. It's not even the same point of comparison. So I don't know what becomes of assistant quarterback running. No, that's Noel. Receivers coach. I'm trying to think of the guy's name, but people really liked him. Nick something. I'm trying to remember his name. I met him once. Um, but good guys that all had like pretty good marks in the coaches last year. I don't know what becomes of them. They're all like on 1 year contracts because they're in school, and GAs bounce around a lot too. They'll go to three, four schools sometimes too. Ryan Nealon's another guy. I don't know what's going to happen to him because his position just seemed like it's kind of overlapped right now with Travis Trickett being there. So a lot of stuff yet to be done. But to your point, yeah, those are going to be your guys that work at quarterbacks in addition to Rich Rodriguez. Do they really need an assistant quarterback coach right now? They're spending like crazy, so there's no reason not to if they need to do it or if they want to do it. That seems like it might be a bit excessive right now too. Patricia, I think, would also, if you look at what they've done, he's coached inside receivers, he's coached tight ends. They don't have an assistant inside receivers coach. They don't have an assistant tight end coach. If you're gonna have a general senior offensive assistant, you figure that's because he can wear a couple of hats. There's a couple hatless positions, I guess, to put it. There's a couple positions that don't have that assistant position coach. They have the regular position coach. Could Trickett be, for lack of a better phrase, the assistant position coach at all those spots? He certainly has that ability.
I mean, whatever it is he's doing, and maybe we'll find out they have not, as of the moment that we're recording this, sent out the press release. And a lot of times in those press releases, they will state exactly what he's doing. Now, you've already had the contract, so
Mhm.
it doesn't state it in there, but he's being paid more than every assistant coach except for Allie, Chad Scott, and Bicknell. So, like out of all these assistant coaches, I believe he's the number 4 on the salary. So they're not paying him to do nothing. So they are paying him a hefty amount of money because they believe he is going to be able to do a lot of things or something very important. So I would not, and I'm not saying you are, but anybody that's listening, don't chalk this up as though it's just another guy. Like I think he's going to be very much involved in what's going on with this offense.
Yeah, and this is not a name that was involved throughout. We've been over some of the other avenues and options they explored, some different names and at different positions on offense, and they came back and said, you know what, plan A didn't work out, or plan whatever didn't work out. This is not the first plan. How's that? I think that's safe to say. They didn't run from it. They found a way to add a guy that they can help, and they did. Chris, let me get you to add your numbers up together in your head here. Zach Alley, 1.5 million. Um, he's the defensive coordinator. Who are the top three position coaches on offense?
They got Chad Scott, Becknell, and Trickett. So 1175, 14 set 15, 5, 1.5 million, 1.525 for those three combined.
So I wonder if they just didn't create the coordinator in aggregate here, for lack of a
Yeah.
better phrase, and just saying these are our three best guys. Here's a run game coordinator, here's a pass game coordinator, something like that, or here's two guys who can coordinate the running game, and here's a guy who can help coordinate the passing game. Um, because we know who the offensive coordinator is. At this point, they're not going to hire. I'd be stunned if they hired like an offensive coordinator right now. Maybe one of these guys gets a title like that in the future. More likely, you're going to see, like I said, specialists titles or whatever. But I wonder if they just didn't say, you know what, we can commit this much money to it, and we did. Now, granted, it's skewed severely by Chad Scott's salary. Oh boy, his bonuses too. We should take a second for that. But you can see something there. They have clear identity on defense. They have a clear identity on offense. It's Rodriguez. But when it comes to who's your coordinator, I wonder if they just didn't like create the position out of three.
And so, but what do you feel about Travis Trickett, Red Rodriguez? If we're focusing on them, those two as quarterbacks, again,
More than
you
enough.
noted Trickett. That's more than enough too, and I think it's good. I mean, Trickett has a lot of experience as coordinator, quarterbacks coach, inside receivers coach. Rodriguez, and I mentioned this at the very beginning when you reported, hey, he's going to be quarterbacks coach. I said, people are going to look at that and think nepotism. They're going to be thinking, oh, he just a head coach hired his son. You take his name away and just give his title of just his experience, like a guy who played quarterback at the highest level, who's been an analyst, who's been a GA, like that's a typical spot to kind of have an entry point. That look at West Virginia's past couple quarterbacks coaches. They've tried that out. Tyler Allen was a guy who was a GA and had done that for a couple years. He was a young guy. So it's not surprising to see a guy like Rhett Rodriguez looking at his resume, solely his resume, and say, yeah, that's a quarterback's coach that can come in and you can pay him 225 and you're good. Like it makes perfect sense. And then you add in Trickett with all his experience, and you got that position pretty well covered, I think.
Running back, they bring Chad Scott back on the last year of his contract, which is a lot of money. By the way, they gave him $140,000 to be the interim coach, which that's a lot of money as well. That's 17
2
days.
weeks. That's it. 17 days.
Yes. Yeah, so that's two pay periods. I guess that is what they said is what the contract says. He'd be broken down two $70,000 payments in separate pay periods. Listen, good for him, man. I mentioned this before. Being, an interim coach is a miserable situation for a team. I would imagine for the head coach too. And I guess you gotta make it worth the while for him to stay and to do it and to do the work. Prorated, Chris, that's about a $3 million salary for a head coach. Do you know what Josh Eiler made for an entire year as the interim coach for a miserable situation in basketball?
Yeah.
Half. Right? So, hey, man, Chad Scott, his agent, props to those guys. And again, to West Virginia for spending and making this work. Like, you've really got to be serious about stuff. And I think this is not a critique of the spending. It's not my money. I don't care. Like, if this was Monopoly, I wouldn't care. But I think a lot of people critique West Virginia for cutting corners and pinching pennies every so often. This is absolutely not that. They gave him a lot of money to be the interim coach, and then they honored his 2025 contract, which is the highest on the offensive end, $725,000, because he was a coordinator for West Virginia, whatever that meant. But he was the offensive coordinator for West Virginia. He had a contract. They honored it for 2025. The right thing to do. They could have bought him out and done something different than you're paying more. So the path of least resistance is just to pay him for this year to do a work. And by the way, you get a good position coach who can show Noel Devine the ropes. Noel is the offensive analyst slash assistant running backs coach, already active on the phones recruiting people, which he can do in his office position. I think that's a guy that if you figure out how to teach him to communicate with the players and how to do the coaching stuff, he knows the football stuff, obviously. That's a pretty exciting opportunity for not only for him and for Scott, but for the offense as well. I have no
I
idea how
think
it'll work, but I think it's exciting.
it should be exciting. He is going to bring some name recognition as well. And this is going to be a trend that it's already started with the quarterback spot, but here running back spot, but you have kind of this two-man team where one is this experienced veteran that has coached before that knows what he's doing. And then you have with him in whichever capacity the two are, it's going to change position by position. But in this case, Chad Scott being in charge, Noel Devine being his assistant, a younger, more excited, more excitable kind of coach that can come in and help out a ton. And I like that dynamic. I love that dynamic of like a veteran coach that can help coach the younger coach as well as coach the position players. Because no Divine's going to come in knowing the position. Like he played the position. He played it very well. Now, it's not always as easy as you might think to play a position or play a sport and immediately start coaching it. It takes an ability to actually relay everything that you've learned over the years. But I think Divine can do that. And if you have Chad Scott at his side, he can help Divine relay all that information on how to become a running back like Noel Divine. So I'm a big fan of this kind of combination as well. Like I think that's keeping Chad Scott, great. Adding Noel Divine, great. And I really like what they did at that spot.
We'll just keep moving down the list here on offense.
Let's do it.
All right. Got two offensive line coaches now too. Jack Bicknell Jr., veteran NFL, many college jobs. We've been over that before. They also bring Derek Dressler from Jacksonville State, which is here's is interesting. You get somebody who knows the Jacksonville State scheme, knows Rodriguez, but also somebody at large in Bicknell who just knows offensive line too. This is not the same as Scott and Devine, but you certainly see parallels here of a guy who knows the job and knows the position, and somebody under him who's going to learn. And that's the other thing too. And Brown was good about this too. At some point, you're also coaching coaches how to coach too. Like you're giving them a chance to do stuff. So this is good for Dressler. It may also be really good for West Virginia too, with who they have and the experience they have individually at Jacksonville State, but also collectively throughout his career, like Bicknell.
Now, Big Now, we kind of broke down you did on the pod, and I think I answered it as well in reference to your pod about kind of how he ended up 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year at a lot of these different stops. And a lot of it was not his just really, really bad luck. Like
Yeah.
getting to a spot, coaching a year, then that head coach getting fired, getting to a spot, head coach getting fired, so on and so forth. Didn't always work out like that, but for whatever reason that he was not coaching this past year, maybe you can shed some light on some of this stuff that his time at Wisconsin and everything, but he knows the game, he knows the position. There's like nobody seems to be doubting that at all. And so, like you said, you have this veteran that knows the position, has decades of experience, and then you can add him in again with a younger offensive line coach who has experience with the Jacksonville State specific stuff. It can like I said, this is gonna be a trend. Like I feel like at a lot of these positions, you really kind of combine two guys into a very good combination to coach the position.
Breaking news from West Virginia, Chris. Are you ready?
No.
Rodriguez names Travis Trickett as senior offensive assistant.
Well, now you've given it away that we're recording this 2 days in advance.
Yeah, right now Mike's in Mexico for a wedding. I missed the bachelor party. I'm not missing the wedding. So yeah, we recorded ahead of time, and this is the danger of this. Like these things could change a lot, but yeah, Chris, it adds nothing new to the conversation. It does not specify any sort of position or roles, just that he would be senior offensive assistant on the Mountaineer coaching staff. So put a pin in that. Um, receivers, nothing wrong with what they've done here. This seems like it'll work out well. Michael Neiswander, tight ends. Blaine Stewart, inside receivers. Ryan Garrett, wide receivers. I don't know that you need an assistant position coach there. If again you need to, Travis Trickett has coached receivers and tight ends before. I think he's probably capable of doing that if he's going to take a break from quarterbacks for a little bit. Um, do you need an assistant position coach there? I don't know, but Chris, you got me thinking about Noel Devine and how this might become like a new normal for coaches. Have you seen Tavon Austin, what he's up to lately?
Oh God, don't Mike. You're gonna get everybody riled up.
Wants to coach, Chris.
Oh
Wants to
boy.
coach. I just wonder how long until he's back in the fold somewhere. Maybe here, maybe at Nebraska. I don't know, but I wonder like because that guy's really smart. Listen, he's electric, but I remember talking about football sometimes being like, man, this guy really gets it and fast too. Special team stuff, but also offense, running the ball, catching the ball. Like he was a pretty good student of the game. I think he could probably teach it. Wants to teach it. Wants to coach at Dunbar. Start off there, see what happens there too. But yeah, listen, they have three guys for essentially three spots there. There's certainly some overlap between inside receiver and tight end, inside receiver, outside receiver. They're also three different positions, but you're going to teach three guys you're gonna have three guys teach three positions. That's fine. That's a luxury you couldn't do before. And just think about like if you're a guy like Rodney Gallagher, who you're a high school quarterback, defensive back potential. You're doing both in college, but if you're trying to learn receiver, you got a guy one guy who's an outside receiver in college, right? You're talking Bilal Marshall. Is he going to be the best uh, teacher for a guy who's trying to learn to play college receiver? Yeah, you could think so because he made the switch from quarterback to receiver himself. I'm speaking of Marshall. But meanwhile, Marshall's also coaching the outside receivers, the inside receivers. Was Gallagher better off further down the road if he has a guy just to himself who's the inside receivers coach? You could argue yes. And then tight ends, like, or a fullback. Is a fullback lost in the wash sometimes because you have a tight end coach and the fullback just happens to be shoved in that room? Should he be in the running back room? Well, fullback isn't a running back or a tight end, really. There's a whole bunch of different examples like this, but the specificity, the fact that you actually have an outside receivers coach, an inside receivers coach, and a tight ends coach, that's a benefit for everybody here. This is why it's good that staffs have swelled like this, and you can afford to give people responsibilities because you're giving your players a much better chance to come out of this on the right side.
I'm going back because this is pre me working this beat, and it overlaps with my college years. So things are a little fuzzy.
Mm.
But did Rich have inside and outside receivers coaches first time through here? Like I was, I'm asking, and then here I am asking you to rack your brain from 20 years ago
Yeah, I
as a
think so
test.
because they only had nine assistant coaches back then, Chris. The 10th assistant coach came in Dana's
Oh,
last
that's
year,
right.
and it was Dan Gerberry. It was the first time they had a 10th assistant coach. So I'd be very surprised they had split like that.
6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, no, okay. Hey, kudos to the whoever runs the WVU Sports website. They do still have the 2007 coaching staff up there. I just pulled it up as I
Oh
asked you.
wow.
So yeah, I mean that's the hey, this is how different is this? Bill Stewart as tight ends coach and special teams coordinator, Jeff Castillo coordinator, and linebackers. Uh, guys doing, hey, all the defensive line, all the safeties, all the quarterback, all the offensive line, all to yourself, all the receivers. Tony Dews, the only receivers coach listed, at least for 2007. So I guess not.
Yeah, different world.
Yep.
That pretty much shows up the offense, right? Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Defense, this is Zach Alley's side of the ball. He's the head coach of the defense. By all indications, he was going to have a hand in who he picked. I have no idea if that happened or not. You would say yes. You might say, I don't know about that, but he gets his defensive line coach in Jacksonville State. I believe that there is a relationship with the Castiles that goes back to when Jake and Allie were both at Boise State. I don't know what the link is with Rod West, Gabe Franklin, and who nobody had heard of before, apparently. And then Allie worked together at Boise State. You're seeing a lot of familiarity here, which is probably what you want to do, which is weird because he did not really have this at Oklahoma, and it did pretty well. I wonder what the expectation or what the reality is here, getting a bunch of guys that he's comfortable and familiar with to get going in his first year right now too. But this this just seemed like it makes sense. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of brow archers here, but apart from West being kind of like I wouldn't say outsider, but like I don't see the link there. And Franklin being out of the sport for 4 seasons, is that right? And then all of a sudden being back in the Power Four program.
Yeah. I mean, that caught me off guard when, the first person who told me, hey, Gabe Franklin got the job. And I was like, wait, uh, I'm searching our system. I'm like, I only Gabe Franklin. I see last coached in 2021, I think it was something like that. They're like, yeah, that's the one. That's the guy. Um, but if you have a familiarity with a guy and you know that he knows the game, that's your choice. If Allie is part of the, I'm assuming part of the reason that he was interested in West Virginia, the hefty sum of money being one of them, but also the ability to be in charge of that side of the ball. Because
Yes.
again, when he was in Oklahoma, he was the defensive coordinator, but was he? Was he really? Like with Venables there? Like I doubt it. So here, this is his domain. He is in charge of that entire side of the ball. I very seriously doubt that Rich Rodriguez is going to be getting himself involved with decision makings and personnels and stuff on that side of the ball. So it is his baby. He gets to pick the coaches, the players, everything. So I think that's a big reason for it. And if that's the guy you want, it's the guy you get.
How do you feel about the Castiles? Jeff's been out coaching for a couple of years. I don't think he did anything with West Virginia last year. He still is in Morgantown, but um, they're going to run a defense that he's familiar with. I don't know that he's got a great enthusiasm for recruiting, but he also doesn't need it. Allie likes him. Rodriguez knows he can count on him. This is a guy who can definitely teach not only the players but the coaches too. I would not have had this on my bingo card initially, but the more I think about it, I like this.
Again, you're bringing in a combination of experience, not only experience in the game as a whole, but experience with the coaching staff and experience with this type of defense, the position. And then you're bringing in somebody who's young and hungry. Jake, I mean, and this is another one of those situations with Jake Castile, the
Mhm.
son. Like, if his last name wasn't Castile, like I don't think, I mean, I'm not saying we're second guessing it, but again, there's probably people that are like, oh, of course, just bring in the coach's son again. Again, he has a resume. He's
Yeah.
done it himself. Like, he is not just a hanger on. Like, he is a guy that's doing it himself. He is a guy that has the experience and should be able to come in and, contribute in the position that he was hired for. So, are we clear on, because he was defensive assistant coach, and I'm looking at it. I'm going through the press release. I'm scrolling. Doesn't say a position. I'm kind of assuming linebacker, since that's a position that he played and that he's helped coach before. It's a lot of linebackers coaches, Mike, because Andrew
And,
Warwick is already the assistant linebackers coach, and Zach Alley is the linebackers coach. And
Andrew Work, by the way, they just take a defensive coordinator from an FCS school because him and Allie are pretty close through the years too. So
who, by the way, just a little I again was I don't know what day that story is going up, but I've already written it and scheduled it. Just a 4-star linebacker who like just happened to go over to Wofford and was like, "Yeah, man, Coach Warwick's awesome. He gave me a tour at Wofford, and now I'm coming to visit WVU." Sure, why the
they
heck
talked about
not?
Morgantown. He had a lot to say about the mountains of West Virginia. I never understood why. Well, now you know,
Yeah.
I guess, right? Never. No,
So,
no, no such nefarious activity, I'm sure. So Jay Castile, again, at Boise with Allie when Allie was an assistant there for Andy Avalos. And then he was uh, Jeff Castile, I believe, did some work like I don't know, like in the spring or whatever with Allie at Jacksonville State. I think I had this story right, and I haven't read it. Someone told me this, and I may have it wrong. And hopefully, no one sees me. I don't think this is too evil though. So there's a lot of familiarity there, but then also like when Allie leaves last year to go to Oklahoma, Jake Castile is there, and he might actually that might have been when Jeff came in. Um, and Jake was an analyst at Jacksonville State last year too. So these are guys who speak the same language, and that's really important at the ground level right now where they're doing this too. And it's like that William Green, defensive line coach, former player at Florida, but also at Jacksonville State, and then I think at Louisiana Monroe with Alley and Rodriguez too. So that does make a lot of sense. Franklin, player at Boise State, assistant coach at Boise State with Alley under Andy Avalos, knows 3-3-5, which again, 3-3-5, 4-2-5, whatever, that's fronts. The back, man, that's particular with your safeties. It's different. Like you're talking five defensive backs. So whether it's a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5, someone who knows how to use the safeties and manipulate them, whether it's an odd front or even front, that's really important. Chris, the one that I think is like really impressive, and it's a name I knew, and I never connected it to this, but like I think Rod West has been a pretty good coach everywhere he's been. If you look at his defenses at Richmond and then Appalachia State, listen, not two juggernauts. I understand that, and he's available because the Appalachia State coach gets let go. But like the players and the units have gotten better with him. And you look at just like his time at Richmond and his time at Appalachia State, like he comes in ground level stuff. The rankings aren't great, but after year one, oh, an all conference player or a second team all conference player. And second year, well, they led the league in this, and they had two all conference players, and this guy would got an NFL camp, and you just see that, which means that give him good ingredients, he's going to produce good recipes, and that's the hope here. Here's a guy who's I guess still young, I mean younger than me, and has been on those like 30 under 30 and 35 under 35 lists. And that's usually voted on by your peers. So for him to have that respect, it seems like he's a good teacher and he'll understand the position. And can't say this enough, they really needed like precise instruction at cornerback in addition to the many other needs they had, which, talent, depth, so on and so forth. Again, good move here in the right direction. And gonna have help from a Nichols coach too. So the nickel backs don't have to be worried about losing teaching time because the cornerbacks coach is working with the wide corners and the inside corners. Henry Weinreich, hey, you get the nickels. Rod West, you get the cornerbacks.
so I'm looking at this. I was trying to figure out, make sure everybody's got a main coach and assistant coach. So
Mhm.
safety or defensive back safeties, you got Franklin, corners, Rod West, just like you said, Weinreich's going to be Nichols, Sam's. So think you're covered there. Maybe room for one more, maybe like another assistant to the assistant.
Assistant safety coach, but then you've got a defensive assistant who, you're right, there's some overlap with linebackers. Do you really need Jay Castile there? And you're saying that Jay Castile doesn't know anything about safeties? I think he probably could cut that, right? Similar, not
Yeah.
not the same as Travis Trickett, but like there's an opening there for the defensive assistant to assist the defense where needed.
And then linebackers, you have Allie technically as the linebackers coach. You have Andrew Warwick as the assistant linebackers coach. You have Jeff Castile as that bandits coach, which you can argue linebacker or defensive line. Special teams, Kirkland Herring, both, the special team coordinator assistant. So you're covered there. I'm not seeing a defensive line assistant coach, Mike. You got William Green, and that's all I see right now.
Could be Castile, right? Could be.
Yeah, like I mean, he's had experience there. I mean, I know he's mostly linebackers, but I think at some point didn't he coach some defensive line early, maybe
Oh,
early in his
Jeff
career?
Castile. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
again, he knows that defense front to back. He could. Jay Castile, linebacker, but you're going to know what the defensive line is doing. Again, your defensive assistant. You better be able to do a couple of different things if you're going to have that title. Otherwise, you'd be a specific title. Maybe they do that. Maybe they have players and coaches on the defensive line, Chris. Novel concept. We'll see. But again, maybe Green can do it, and perhaps there's one more move in there. But also, they have an assistant defensive line coach. They also have assistant receivers coaches and assistant offensive line coaches, although now have two. But I don't know yet what's going to happen with those graduate assistants from Neil Brown's staff when their contracts are up, not before too long. So perhaps some of those blanks are filled with people who are on staff. Perhaps when they move out, someone else moves in. I don't think we're quite finished yet. We haven't put the punctuation marks in the staff, believe it or not.
So throughout this process of assembling this staff, I think there was, and yeah, I'm not blaming the fans for this. There was a little uncertainty early on with some of the hires. There was a lot of young guys. There was a lot of guys that were just bring a couple guys from Jacksonville State, bring back a Castile, bring back a Rodriguez, bring back a Trickett. Well, Trickett didn't work out. I'm talking about Rick there. But
Or Clint.
yeah, we're Clint. But then I think it evolved from there. And you started adding guys in, like you mentioned, like Rod West. Like, man, that's a good ad. That's kind of out of nowhere. Oh, you bring Chad Scott back. I like that move. And you keep going from there, culminating in the alley edition, and then filling out around that. Ultimately, where would you kind of grade what they did with this staff? Like now that it's mostly probably, how'd you phrase it? Mostly, definitely, probably done in your
Probably
story.
nearly complete, right? Yeah.
Probably nearly complete. How would you grade this staff now? Like, because I think my answer would have been different even just a couple weeks ago than it would be right now.
I'm probably in that like B minus range because I have the same um curiosity. There's a lot of people who followed him from Jacksonville State. And I think that's fine to an extent, but we've also seen that not work in a lot of places too. And I just can't get over the number of 1 year contracts, which means that those guys are probably auditioning. I think that's fair to say. I think the Zach Alley hire is significant for not just what it means to the team, but what it means for what they're trying to do here. To bid a lot of money, and then my understanding that reported this Oklahoma bid more, but he had his hands on the defense here. He would be the head coach of the defense. And for a guy who I'm sure aspires to be a head coach one day, perhaps sooner than his mentor Brent Venables was, but certainly one day, I think he sees the way to do that is what he's doing right now. So for West Virginia to do that is a big deal. And you kind of have to trust that when you give him that privilege, that responsibility, he's going to put the pieces together. And then an offense, again, similar. Like Rich Rodriguez is the head coach of the offense. You're going to trust his guys that he puts on the field to coach because his offenses have generally been pretty productive, and certainly the last couple of years, and he brought those guys with him too. I wonder about some of the coaches who just have been inactive. Bicknell didn't coach last year. It did not end well for him at Wisconsin. There were some player complaints, but also Wisconsin has changed offenses and went in a different direction where that's not what he's done or what he does best. But he was like an administrator just on the sideline last year. Um, Jeff Castile out of the game for a while, like we said. Gabe Franklin hasn't been coaching for a couple of years. Those are things that I need to see the return on the investment for before I can say, yeah, that's awesome. It could be bad too. And then what I will give them credit for is, Chris, they've hired one, maybe two coaches from a staff. One is Allie, and the other one is Andrew Warwick, who I don't know, he might have been out of contract there. He's at an FCS school. Those are typically 1 year contracts. Everybody else, perhaps including Warwick, needed a job. Am I counting the guys from Jacksonville State? Not really. They came with them, but like, were they going to be here unless Rodriguez came here? No. There is a benefit to that though, Chris. That kind of comes how about this? A more manageable cost. Sometimes other schools are paying those coaches a little bit of their salary. West Virginia's taken advantage of that before. Sometimes they'll take a less salary because they need to work. So when you get a guy like Rod West, he's available, great. You don't have to buy him out of his contract. He comes from a school where he probably wasn't making a huge salary at Appalachia State. Maybe Appalachia State's paying some of his salary here, but you get a good corner coach for maybe a discount. But certainly he was available. Um, there's a couple coaches like that. They just needed work. Chad Scott, Blaine Stewart, like those guys needed a job. Chad Scott's probably an outlier because he makes the amount of money we talked about, but um, is that the best indication that they got the best staff? You would argue no, right? They weren't plucking players or plucking coaches from like championship staffs or conference leading staffs, but they also had to get a lot of people on board, and they did. And they managed to do this without, breaking the piggy bank and without going into the rainy day fund and all that. That's fine. That's a small part of it, I think. But if you step back, even these guys that we're talking about who needed work or who were out of work, you can explain a lot of them. Familiarity, um, knowledge of the defense, some sort of backstory that makes sense. There's exceptions like Bicknell. I don't know what the bond is, the link is, except he was with Rodriguez for 1 year. Well, now it makes sense. Yeah, he had a gap in his resume, and yeah, he's had a couple jobs in a couple years, but that 2019 team at Ole Miss could really run the ball. That was Rodriguez calling the plays and Bicknell coaching the offensive line. So that makes sense. Yeah, Franklin's been out of the business for 4 years, but I don't think he was away from football completely. And he knows what they're going to try to do on defense at that safety position. So even the parts that look strange, whether it's nepotism, whether it's guys following from Jacksonville State, whatever qualifier you want to attach to it, you could also on the other side of it attach something that makes sense. There is an explanation to it too. So you might trend towards C because it's not impressive, but those explanations might make you trend up toward a B minus.
For those watching, you probably saw me frantically typing off to the side because we just got some breaking news, Mike. This should have fit on the last podcast. Again, maybe you and I talked about an hour ago recording the first podcast, and now we're recording the second podcast. It's coming out a couple of days later, but we said, man, I think they need one more piece on the offensive line to really shore up this transfer class. Well, breaking news from Chris Hummer here at 24/7 Sports, reporting that Tykeist Crawford, who played at Arkansas and had originally committed to UCLA to transfer to UCLA, has changed his tune and will be a Mountaineer, according to Hummer and the agents for Crawford. Not a bad little addition there. Exactly what we said they still needed right on time. Yeah, and look, outbidding UCLA. West Virginia has outbid Ole Miss and outbid UCLA. Pretty good. Um,
What year is
go.
this? We said 2025? What?
So
That's
going back to I'll answer my part of the grade too. You said B minus. I'm slightly higher. I had the same concerns you do, like the same concerns about, hey, you got a couple guys that haven't coached in a while. Are we adding guys just because they're your buddies and your friends' buddies and all that stuff? A little bit of concern about that, but the hire of Allen basically sets the floor as a B minus for me. It can't
Yep.
get any lower because that was the most important hire for the staff. Whether it's Allie or somebody else, but securing the man at defensive coordinator, and that's somebody you can trust. And I think he's probably one of the more coveted defensive coordinators in the entire country. And they went out and spent like it. So I think you hire him. My floor is a B minus. I love the retention, I guess we'll call it, of Chad Scott on the offensive side. I think you just essentially secure that what could be one of the most, maybe this, it's hard to say it's the most important position, but West Virginia going to run the ball a lot. We've said that a lot. So your running backs better be good, and you have secured one of the best running back coaches around by retaining Chad Scott. So I'm going like a B plus, maybe just a fringe B plus. What did they do it like a 87 out of the 100 point scale? Just on the lower end of the B plus, because yeah, I do still have some of the same concerns you do. It's just that the alley one is so big for me that I can't go much lower than that.
Got Shaheem White too. Like I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Jaheim White's here. If Chad Scott's not
Did
here.
you see that? Yeah, I know. You're not sure? He said it on video. He posted it to like an Instagram video or a TikTok, whatever the kids are using these days, and was like, basically, he would have left if Chad Scott now would not have been retained. So,
Speaking of Instagram, I found the Tavon Austin post where he's talking about getting into college or getting into
oh
coaching. He
boy.
wants to go to Dunbar. Um, Here are the people who have responded to this: Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper,
Oh,
uh, Torrey Smith, um, Bud Dupree, more Amari Cooper,
that's a lot of NFL people.
John Flowers, uh, Sammy
Not
Watkins,
noted, not NFL person.
Shelton
That's
Gibson.
there you go. NFL
Yeah, so
person.
like just some of those names at the top there: Stephon Diggs, Torrey Smith, like guys that got like NFL past, present, like that's your Tavon Austin thing. So I don't know what the futures are for a over under number of years until he's at West Virginia or a college program somewhere. But hey, that's the new normal. Yeah, new normal. Large coaching staffs, a lot of money going into it, a lot of positions, a lot of press releases too. Stuff. A lot of FOIAs.
I
Tough.
think you need to FOIA the contract for those who send out the press release to see if they're getting paid extra for all this extra
Ooh,
work.
need a raise. A lot of them. I mean, a lot of copy and paste. You notice that? Like I don't. This is like a trend, I guess, too, and it's probably completely acceptable. But the bios you read about a player at one school typically ends up in the bio at a new press
Yes.
release too. So that's how they're so productive and so prolific.
Amazing.
Probably get myself in trouble here. Maybe I'll get out. I'm out of the country. I don't care. Maybe I'm not coming back. That about wraps it up here. Coaching staffs maybe done, probably nearly complete, just like the transfer portal, which Chris, the first sentence of the story we posted with the podcast on Monday was that you should probably listen to this as soon as you can because it could be dated before too long. And yeah, we didn't even get 2 hours out. We had a pretty impressive offensive player join the fray. Until then, I'm Mike Casazza.
I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.